Do you still have copious amounts of candy left over after Halloween? Do you wish you could eat it all without getting fat? Do you still have skeletons of small animals buried in your backyard? Do you wish I could help you with one of these 3 problems? Well, then you're in luck, because on this week's episode of Hot Cocoa, we're going to take a look at core data, and we'll teach you how to catalog all your candy, so you know exactly how much you have to eat. Coming up on Hot Cocoa. To begin making our candy inventorying system, we need to start Xcode and go to File and New Project. And instead of creating a regular application, we want to create a core data document-based application. And that'll create a document-based application that is based on the core data frameworks. And the difference between a document-based application and a regular application is a document-based application lets you have more than one instance or copy of a document open. Like a text edit would be a document-based application because all of your documents share the same menu bar, but you can have more than one open at one time. So we're going to create the core data document-based application, and let's call it Candy Inventory. There we go. And here is our project. Now there's a few new files that I need to introduce you to. Here we have our regular main menu.nib, or zib in this case. But if you open it, you'll notice that it only has the menu. And that's because the actual interface for our application is contained in my document.zib this time. And you'll see our empty window here. And what happens is when the user goes to our application, goes to File New, it'll create another copy of whatever we put in my document.zib. We also have here my document.xc data model, and this is where we will be designing our the sort of framework for the array that we're going to put our candy information into. So if we open this up and make that a little bit smaller, like so, you'll see we have sort of a grid down here, and we have entities and properties. Now, entities are sort of the objects that we're going to be creating. So, for example, if you were creating an application that stored a bunch of cereal as an inventory in it, you'd have an entity called cereal, and then every time you added a new cereal, it would make a copy of that entity. And then each entity has properties, and properties would be things like price, quantity, stuff like that. So we're going to create an entity, and we're going to call that entity candy. Hit enter, and then we want to add a couple of attributes to it. First attribute is going to be brand name, and we want to make that a string. I'm going to hit enter, and you can also set some properties for the requirements for that, like you can set the min length or the max length and the default value. We'll just leave that blank. We need an attribute called unit price, and that will be a decimal. And we'll make the min value for that 0, since it's unlikely that you would have a negative price. Hit enter, and we need a quantity, and we will make that a 32-bit integer in case you have ridiculously large amounts. And also make that 0. And we need a total price, and that will be a decimal as well, and we'll make that 0. So we have this set up. We can save that and close. So once we've built our framework, our sort of prototype for what our array is going to look like. We want to build our interface. We want to do that by going to mydocument.zib, opening that up, and you can delete your document contents here. And let's hide Xcode, get it out of the way. The first thing we're going to need is an array controller, and that's going to it's going to basically operate and manage our array that has all of our candy information in it. So search for, there's the array controller. We'll add that in there, and then we want to, under its attributes in the inspector, we want to change its mode to entity, and we want to tell it to use the candy entity that we just created. I'm going to turn on prepares content so that it automatically prepares content when it is loaded from nib. And that way we don't have to tell it to update. I'm going to rename it candy, just so it makes more sense if you have more than one of them to actually name them something other than array controller. And then one final thing we want to do is under its bindings, we want to bind it to the file owner. So we'll set this to file owner and turn on bind to, and we want to bind it to its managed objects context. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow file owner to handle all of our undo and saving and loading stuff for us, so we don't have to write any code at all for that. Now for the interface, we need a table view. There we go. Drop that in there, make it bigger, and we're going to need 4 columns. So click 1, there we go. 2, 3, 4. Then click on the header there so we can, oops. When you're dealing with views, it's always difficult to select just the right one. But if you're careful, and this one, there we go, there they are. Alright, so there are other 2 text cells. Our columns, and we want to name the first column candy brand. And second one we'll make our unit price. Third will be our quantity. And fourth will be our total price. And for the unit price, quantity, and total price, because if you'll remember in the data model that we made the unit price and total price decimals and the quantity an integer. We need to use a number formatter, because if we didn't use a number formatter, when you tried to put it in the array, it would be trying to give the array an ns string object instead of an ns number object, which would mismatch the data type, because you can't put an ns string object into an integer property. So we need a number formatter. Oops. Number. And we want to drop that on the cell. So it'll be highlighted. Drop it on there. Drop one on here. And drop one on there. And for the 2 ones that represent price, we want to change that to the currency formatter. It's a bit tricky to get it selected. I found the easiest way is to click once down here, click again out there, click a third time down there, and then click once on the actual number itself, and then click once more on this little circle right here. That'll let you change the formatter. I'm going to change that one to currency and generate decimal numbers and always show decimals. And then over here, do the same thing. Currency. And then generate decimal numbers and always show decimal. And then we will also need 2 buttons to add and subtract stuff from the list. And if you look at the Apple Human Interface Guidelines, it actually specifically states that if you're going to be adding or subtracting stuff from, if you're going to be changing an element on the form on the window, you should use a gradient button instead of a push button, which you generally only use for actions. So we'll stick our gradient buttons right there. and make one of them add, and one of them, remove. And I totally can't spell. And the first thing we can do is actually you link the buttons like you usually do, except for instead of linking them to an app controller, we're going to link them to the array controller, which you'll see it has preset actions for add, fetch, insert, remove, select next, and select previous. So what we're going to do is link add to add, and remove to remove. Simple enough. Link them the same way, hold down control, and then click and drag. Now for these up here, what we need to do, and close this, we need to set up their bindings. And what bindings are, like we set up the binding between the array and the file owner. Bindings take two values and they link them so that when one changes, it changes the other, and vice versa. So that way, if we change something in here, it'll automatically update the array. We're going to do that by selecting the column, which again, be careful what you're selecting. If you look up at your scroll view, and click again, table view, and click one more time, then you've selected the column. We want to set the column value under the bindings tab. So it's bindings to bind it to the candy array. Set the controller key to arranged objects. That'll return the objects that are within the array. And you can see you can also return just the selection that you have, just whatever's selected at that time. And then you want to make this one brand name. This will be the name of the property that you set up. Then do the same thing for unit price. Bind unit price. Quantity. Bind quantity. Quantity. And same with total price. Total price. Here we go. Now if we save this, you'll notice we have written not a single line of code, but we should already have a fully functioning application here, which I will show you. Quit Interface Builder, go back to Xcode, run it, yes, save it all, and it will compile our application. And here's our application, yay! And we'll minimize that. So if you add one, set your branding name, your candy name to like M&M's. Unit price will be $39. Really expensive M&M's. And you'll notice that if you try and put in a value that's not a currency, like 89, it'll tell you it's a formatting error. And you can either hit OK and enter another one, or discard change and enter another one. So it'll know if you haven't entered an actual currency. Our quantity 3 and total price. This we'll set this programmatically later, but for now you can set it to whatever you want. And you can add more. You can remove it, and you'll notice even undo works. If you do edit, redo, edit, undo, that works. Save works. You can go to save and see candy. If you save it, we'll close it. You can open it back up again. There it is. It should even be under open recent. There it is. You can open it from there. And our candy's all set up. And so we have just created an entire database running application using absolutely no code. Now in the next episode, we will take a look at how to set all those values with code, because there's one thing that we haven't implemented yet. And if we go back in here, you'll notice ideally what would happen is if you changed either the unit price or the quantity, it would automatically update the total price. So that's what we're going to do next episode, learn how to actually get the values from the array and work with them in programming. Coming up next week on Hot Cocoa episode 5. See you then.